Hello, and welcome to the All-Star Advocacy Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Castro. This week, we have a very special guest joining us. He is a former Major League Baseball player with the San Diego Padres, the LA Dodgers, the Milwaukee Brewers, and Philadelphia Phillies. He is now the new color commentator for the San Diego Padres, and he is a member of our All-Star Advocacy team. And he is the son of Mr. Padre himself. Today we have on Mr. Tony Gwynn Jr. Thank you so much for coming on, Tony. How are you?
I'm well, Mike. How about yourself? I got a lot of titles there,
And more to add to, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I'm good, man. I'm good. We're doing well. We're staying blessed. Obviously, we made it, right? We're, Happy New Year. Here we are in February of 2021. And we're just so glad to have, another member of our All-Star Advocacy team on to bring these conversations to, our youth audience primarily.
Yeah.
And, our local audience, or even if you're not from, San Diego or California for that matter. And before we kind of dive into it, just wanted to say, just touching back on your new gig, congratulations. As somebody who's a San Diego Padres local and diehard, at times as hard as that can be through some seasons. I'm really glad and can't wait to hear you on the radio calling this incoming season. It's going to be, I think, a very don't want to make too many predictions, but a very good year, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I think you obviously have to play the games, but I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to do these games on an everyday basis. For the last 4 years, it's kind of been I kind of been playing like a utility role, right? Where I'm doing a little bit of TV, I'm doing a little bit of the color commentating on the radio, occasionally get on TV a little bit. And it's been good for me, I've been able to sharpen a whole bunch of different tools for my toolbox, and now I'm getting an opportunity to do it on an everyday basis. So hopefully it's like the radio, like the radio show. I was much like yourself when I first started out, trying to get a feel for the rhythm of everything, and the more reps you get, the better you get. So
like everything.
Exactly. The more you work at it, the better you get.
That's awesome, man. Well, we can't wait to hear you on the call. And, just going back to having you on as a guest today, obviously coming off of our first episode with Bruce Maxwell, he really spoke to, and that's what we want to speak to is, your story in particular, your upbringing and, any things you've had to face while playing the sport, and even, throughout your life now into, commentating and fatherhood. But really touching on the fact that although, Bruce maybe he was raised in a different city and state, and you are, home-bred, local San Diegan, although there were two different upbringings, there's that same commitment to this community, and you want to pour in your resources and really help lift this next generation of San Diegans that are, play sports and are interested in these types of things. So we couldn't wait to have you on. And if we can, let's just dive right into it. Growing up here in San Diego, I know you were born in Long Beach, but, you spent your formative years, your childhood here in San Diego. Can you just talk to us a little about what it was like growing up in the Poway area, correct?
Yeah.
Just any, what was that like, first and foremost?
So, I was born in Long Beach, California. I only was there for a few months, before we moved down to San Diego. And, it might have been a little bit, it might have been a year before we moved to San Diego. Once my dad was called up to big leagues is when we made our way down to San Diego. So like you said, all of my formative years were here in San Diego. And we moved into the Poway area when I was a young boy, maybe 4 or 5. And It was a small community at the time, predominantly white. There wasn't a lot of black families there, and so you kind of knew who the black families were. You know, it was one of those situations where, because my mom and dad came from a pretty black area in Long Beach, I think it takes some time to begin to trust the people around you. You're moving into a new neighborhood, you don't know a lot of people, and so early on, my formative years was really being around my family, my extended family, my uncles. My mom had she has two sisters and five brothers, so there was a lot of cousins. So most of my young childhood was formed spending time with my extended family. And then as you kind of acclimate into the area you are, you begin to the trust level was a little bit higher, and you start to know different people. We had a really one set of neighbors that lived next to us in Poway. They were a white family that my mom and dad trusted really well. And until they moved away, like that was like who we were with most of the time. But other than that, it was really just family. And then as a kid, most of our influences, a lot of them come from, schoolmates, being around different people. And because I went to a private school, that was where most of the time I was the only black kid in my class. I didn't really venture out because those kids didn't really live in my neighborhood. And so, I was driving 35, 40 minutes away from the community in which I live in Poway. And so I never really got to have a whole lot of friends at school. Most of the people I hung with were people I knew in Poway and my family. And so it was a pretty tight knit situation. And it wasn't until I wanted to go to public school. It just, for me at the time, when, you're that young, you're not thinking about any of this. You're thinking about, like, can I get a few more hours of sleep? And, you're constantly driving by the school that's right next to your house to go to a private school. And finally, I was like, I'm ready to go to public school, And it was really, when I got to, the middle school here in Poway, it was really the first time that I had been been in a school where there were, multiple African-American kids, black kids in the school. And so even with that being said, there were very few. You can count them maybe on two hands that were in the school at the time that I was. And that's kind of, what it was like growing up most of the time. As I got into sports, my circle got a little bit bigger. You get into your formative years when you're going into 14, 15, and you're playing AAU basketball, you're playing baseball. And now I'm getting outside of Poway. I'm getting, you start having friends that live down in Lemon Grove, or you have friends that live in Southeast. And that's where, high school wise, really my formative years come from. And because of who my dad was, it wasn't as though my mom who was really the big dog in terms of the protection part. She couldn't afford to just trust me around any and everybody, my dad was a public figure. So there's an element of that is attached to that, which is why it was such really, other than maybe the 9 or 10 friends I had in San Diego, it was really a lot of family.
Right.
And a lot of my influences, because my family really lived in Long Beach, we were the only ones at the time that lived here in San Diego. A lot of my influence when it comes to music and things of that nature come from down that way, And
right.
So it was a pretty tight knit situation for the most part.
I mean, that's great, man. I mean, I feel like just hearing you say that, there's so much, similarity with many other upbringings, right? To keep the circle tight, keep it close when you're talking about community and trust. And, just speaking from somebody who grew up in a large Mexican household, very much the same way. It was cousins, it was second cousins, uncles and aunts that, on weekends, that was kind of the go-to when you start learning, as a child and into middle school, what home base is, what community is. And then it's through, like you said, sports in middle school, and also, public school. I went to public school growing up. There's something to be said for the diversity and the inclusion and just learning other cultures at a very young level that, just hearing you speak on that is, I think it's really important.
It's funny because, even in a small community like Poway, when I started coming to public school here in Poway, is when I started really seeing other cultures, for the first time. And that's in Poway, which is predominantly a white area.
Sure.
But still, there were enough different cultures here compared to when I was going to private school that, allowed me to see different things and see different perspectives a little bit.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. And I understand exactly where, your mom would be coming from at that time. Your dad's a, hometown hero. His accolades and his career is taken off. And, you guys can't go really anywhere without, hey, that's the Gwynn family and what that means. So it's just great to hear how, no amount of, fame or really, cliche, it's always family. It's always, respecting the situation, protecting, family, and then also just growing that trust.
I feel like that's one of the things that my mom and dad did that kept us grounded was, we got to see where they came from, and they weren't in it. They were a middle class family, but it wasn't what we were living like in Poway, So, when I was spending summers with my grandmother down in Long Beach, I got to see, where they came from, and that culture I think was important in staying grounded. I think that's one of the things that my dad, I felt like walked in, like that's who he was. And so there's a certain humility that comes with that. You realize that everything isn't, as it's presented to you on this in front of you right now. There had to be some work put in, and it doesn't mean that just because you get to this part that you leave your folks behind, and so it was never. It was a big family, Gwynn's and Cureton's just combined basically. Once Dad got me.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And so let's kind of segue into that, right? So that was, your childhood growing up. Obviously, sports is something that broadened your eyes and like anyone really getting involved at the youth level, into middle school, high school age. Could you think of a time, around the time that you were, starting to play sports that, it could be, on the field or off the field, but, an instance of, racism or inequity or mistreatment, at a very young age that you had to either, overcome or, offshoot off that, how did your dad and your mom, help prepare you for a situation like
that? I gotta admit, I was really lucky when it came to sports, that I had good people that I happened to end up playing for. I was really lucky when it came to that. There were very few. I can't think of any instances where. Now, don't get me wrong. You had to go out. My parents gave me the mindset that you couldn't leave no doubt, when it came to athletics. You had to stand out, and there was just no other option. And so that was always my mindset, was that I was going to go out and leave no doubt. And the coaches that I played for credit, they played it straight up. And so I was lucky with that, because you hear that stuff even as a youngin. You hear that kind of stuff growing up, and so you're prepared for it. You're always, you think you have your guard up for it, or in some regards you expect it. But I was lucky. That was never the case with me when it came to playing sports.
That's awesome. Very fortunate, man. Very fortunate, because I mean, hearing just being on the call with Bruce, last week, telling it really depends on upbringing and situations, and when those come in contact with things at whatever age, it's always something to, in this country, be prepared for, and whether that's that's kind of the sad history.
Maybe that's the privilege of being Tony Gwynn's son, is that there's at least a respect level there. I don't know, but I certainly had Black friends that didn't have the same situation as me. It didn't happen to me, but it wasn't as though I didn't see it happen, in other situations.
Sure. And so let's dive right into your high school journey at Poway High, and then I see for those that aren't watching, he's repping that red and black SDSU. You did your college at San Diego State University. We're lucky, so fortunate to be coached by your father during that time, and then your pro career took off in 2006, I believe.
Yep.
And then you played all the way up until 2014, about?
2015 was my last year. 2015 was my last year in the big leagues, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, what was that landscape like, during that time, in terms of, going through college, going through, your pro career, for someone who's kind of dating himself. That was my high school and kind of college years, right? So I'm trying to think of how things were different, even 10 years ago, 12 years ago. What can you speak to on just where the landscape was in terms of, athletes, maybe, speaking out on social issues, or just playing through that?
I mean, when I was in high school, around, 97 to 2000, you could start to see a shift in the athlete, right? In terms of how they moved, how they dressed. We're moving from the Michael Jordan era into the Allen Iverson era,
Sure. Culture shift.
It really was. It really was. And so obviously that's the era that kind of influenced me, right? I'm getting, as I start to play in sports, and landscape was much different. The game changer is social media. That's the ultimate game changer, because I'm not 100% sure that the athletes of 97 to 2010 couldn't do what the athletes now are doing. But they couldn't control the narrative, their own narrative. They couldn't control their own story the way the athlete can now. So you could have an interview, and really your only way to combat something that may have been misinterpreted on an interview, or stand by whatever you said on an interview, was to do another one.
Right.
That's also going to be in TV. You get those things get sliced up because it has to fit into a certain time limit. They can't just run the whole interview. I mean, right. Unless you're dealing with one of the HBOs or something like that. So it was a different ball game, and so now, as in terms of being able to speak out, the athlete or people who just desire to have a voice in the conversation. Obviously, athletes already bring on enough, have their own platform, just because they're in a league that everybody watches, whatever the league may be. They can use that to their advantage now. In terms of me, in my journey, from high school on, it was always one of those things. You couldn't leave any doubt. And I remember getting to the point, because I wanted to play basketball. I wasn't even, baseball was a second thought.
But you did hoop.
I did. That was my first love. That was my passion. And, as I started to get older, as I started to 16, getting to 17, I'm realizing these dudes are 6'3", 6'4". I don't know if I'm going to get to that height. And I was pretty good at baseball. I hadn't really poured into baseball though yet. And so I remember my junior year getting to that point. I went out and played, and I had a decent year. And I got invited to what they call area code tryout, which is like, the best people in your area to get together. There's a bunch of college scouts, a bunch of professional scouts, and you go out and you play some games. And this was the first time I actually prepared to play baseball. I remember I traveled with my dad during beginning part of the summer, worked on my swing. And so I ended up going this area code. I had a great area code, and the letters start coming. And it was like one of the coolest experiences, getting to that point. But the tough part is you're then reminded that this is just the beginning part of it. Like this, you've garnered the attention. Now you have to take care of business, not only on the field, but you got to take care of business in the classroom. And that was something that, for me, took a little bit of time to get in my head and understand that
the student portion of student athlete.
The student portion of student athlete was a struggle for me early on. And there's a time where I had to figure out what I was going to do. Going into my senior year, I had, most kids are getting sixth period off and most seniors are getting ready to do that. I had to take night school. I had to do 3 classes aside from the 6 that I was taking because I was so far behind. My mom went out and found this tutor for me. Her name is Maureen Rodman. And from that point on, I got my mind right, and she helped me, just get organized. And
shout out Maureen.
Yeah, shout out to Maureen, because she got me right. And from there, I just played. And you brought up being able to play for my dad. I wasn't going to go to San Diego State. I was headed to Cal State Fullerton. They were like one of the top baseball teams in the country.
It's a mill. I mean, the Titans are outside of Long Beach State. I got to say, gotta give credit to your alma mater, but
those are the 2 teams. Those are the 2 teams that really, at that time were the teams that you places you wanted to go play baseball. So I got an offer to go to Fullerton, and I was on my way. And then one day my dad walked in the room. This is like, I want to say it's like May, maybe June-ish. He goes, I'm getting close to time to retire. And Coach Dietz, who was the coach at the time at San Diego State, he's holding on to that job for me. I think I want to do it. And so, I was always envious as a little leaguer of kids that got to play for their dad. It was just something that was never in the cards for me. Like
throughout your, little league time, I mean, he was
playing the game, right? So he was never around. So after he told me that, I agonized for like a month or so, because I didn't want to, as a 17-year-old, the 16-year-old at the time, calling a college coach and telling them that who has been working with you while you were not even close to being eligible to go there, who stayed with you, and all of a sudden you're finna tell him you want to change up. That's a big conversation for a 16-year-old at the time. So I built up enough courage, and I actually didn't call the guy who was recruiting me. I called the head coach, Coach Horton, and he actually was really understanding. He understood what was at stake in terms of me getting an opportunity for me to play for my dad. And he let me go. He told me if I wanted to come back, I could. And so from there, I never turned back. I went and I got a chance. My dad was the hitting coach my sophomore year, and then he was the head coach my junior year. And that was the most time we ever got to spend around each other. Like you said, usually up until then, he was playing during, the majority of the year. By the time, he's done with the season, I'm back in school. So this was the first time we got to spend like year round with one another. Our relationship was already really good, but it kind of blew up after that.
That's awesome, man. It's so fortunate to have that story to share. The closeness and the bond you guys already had, but what those years looking back on it now, the relationship that you guys had, really important. And that's what took you right to that next level into your pro career, and, your time here with the Padres, your time, through those other teams. And if we can kind of segue, because it is, Black History Month in February, right, that we're airing this, and, the importance of so many major leaguers that have recently passed, right? We've got Joe Morgan, we've got, Hank Aaron, we've got Lou Brock, and, those in baseball and those really around baseball. I'm including, media, right? Pedro Gomez, recently. There have been, this last wave of, unfortunately death of those living legends in the game of baseball. And, coming up on Jackie Robinson Day, needing to continue these stories, needing to continue their legacy. I recently heard there was a sit down that you had, a prior interview, while you were speaking on the time that you were with the Dodgers. And it was around Jackie Robinson Day. Everyone in Major League Baseball wears the number 42 on that day. And it was a conversation that you had with Don Newcomb,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. Can you just let us know kind of what that was about, and really, just understanding that time and kind of what it means in present day?
I mean, it's always relevant, right? The sad part about losing the legends is that those legends have been like idols for like literally the last 3-4 generations of ball players that have come through in terms of like eras,
Yeah.
Joe and Hank and Gibson,
Gibson
and Brock. I mean, they all were idols of, the Winfields, the Gwynns, the Griffeys, the Bonds, all the way down. There's just numbers of players that saw them as the guys to look up to, and so, that part is tough for sure in terms of being able to participate in Jackie Robinson Day, especially with the Dodger uniform in particular is just crazy. Being able to sit down with Don Newcomb, who was around Jackie,
right,
and had to see what he endured, and admittingly would tell you it had to be Jackie because he was the right person. If it had been him, the whole thing would have blown up.
In terms of his temperament.
In terms of the temperament. And just hearing that and getting a chance to sit down with somebody who experienced it like live and in effect, is mind blowing. But it gives you perspective. It gives you you want to go out and honor those guys because of what they had to endure in order for us to play a game and have the same, right? I mean, just think about it. Jackie wasn't even allowed to stay in the same hotel as his teammates, like that was just like the norm. And he had to endure that in order for us to be able to play this game. And in some regards, we've obviously not in some regards, we've come a long way. There's no doubt, but there's still, especially in the game of baseball, in terms of getting more participants that look like me. It's got to be something that's at the forefront and that is addressed. And it doesn't just take, Major League Baseball isn't solely responsible. I mean, we've got to do a better job in the outreach for the young kids. Right now they're playing basketball and football, and I don't know if I can blame them. I love the game of baseball, but everything from the type of action or the lack of action that there is to the expense of the game are all deterrents for people that are like me that may not have the funds to do this all the time. So there's a number of things that have to be addressed in terms of that. But certainly, for me, that's one of the things that, I myself, the Players Alliance, are all focused on. We want to see that. We want to see that happen because I think, you might have saw the post I had the other day with the 89 or 88 All-Star team.
All-Star team.
The whole starting lineup was all yeah. And you, at the time when you're young, and that's why do you think I'm so interested in the game? I see people that look like me having success doing it and look like they're having a blast doing it,
right.
And so Major League Baseball, from that standpoint, has to do a better job of promoting the game and finding unique ways to do it.
Right. Right. Couldn't agree with you more. As a obviously longtime baseball fan, having that connection at an early age is so important. And really, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that story of your conversation with Don, and how that really segues into this next question is that youth connection, right? You and I crossed paths this last year in what was a very heightened time this past summer, and I think what we connected on was the fact that we, both coming from this part of town, wanted to do more for our hometown on bigger issues, right, politically, and staying engaged and staying active, but really getting to our youth, through the message, through the conduit of athletes, right? How to affect the next generation through sport in real issues that impact your daily, weekly, monthly, the rest of your lives.
Right.
So could you, kind of speak on, you touched on when you were a kid, right, and what you saw in terms of representation, but now, time goes on, and you're now, you're a father. You've got 4 kids. You've got 3 daughters that play soccer, and got little Junior. Can you speak on kind of your turning point in terms of what your father instilled in you in terms of be active in your community and really giving back and showing the next generation, where you stand?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, my dad was a big believer in giving back to community, and he also was big on it. It wasn't his desire for it to be publicized. He felt like if he was doing it, he was doing it out of kindness, and bringing a light to it wasn't something he was interested in. So I try to live by the same kind of creed, if you will. I think in today's climate, I think we've gotten to a point where you have to have some solid ground underneath you. And what I mean by that is you got to be able to articulate where you stand on things that you find important. for me, the turning point probably was Ahmaud Arbery. That one, it just hit me different.
The video footage, the fact that can just be happening in 2020.
1,000%. It just hit me different. And from that point on, I think we all were at a spot where some of us didn't know exactly what to do next. You know what I'm saying? But I got active after George Floyd. And the part that got me was when my daughter saw it. I don't know I can't describe the look that was, but it was almost like they were having an out of body experience as they were looking at it, you know? And then like immediately the things my mom and my dad had said to me when I was younger, like started flooding back to my head, you know, about, you know, how you got to act in the car. Like it just came flooding back through. And at that point, you know, you start searching, you know, I think a lot of us started searching to figure out what it was we needed to do, what was actually the appropriate to do in terms of how you went about it, what was actually going to get something done, you know? And I think that's where it all kind of started for me. The first one, the Arbery situation really, it got me good. And so at that point, I made a decision that I wanted to be a part of the solution. And it's not that I didn't want to be a part of the solution before, because I consider myself doing that, but it was some more urgency to it, I think, is how I can describe it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, what you're speaking to in that feeling, you know, because of social media, going back to, you know, everyone can broadcast anything happening live these days, and less and less things get missed. And to see, you know, something like these atrocities this past year happen, and there be footage of it, and not only that, it's what are we going to do to fix this type of thing happening in our society? Why has this not been, you know, rooted out? And where our leadership was, you know, at the time, in terms of let's do something about this as concerned Black, brown, you know, you want to use minority, whatever, you know, demographic. It's a humanity. It's no one deserves to be, you know, executed for running through a neighborhood. I don't, you know, or you know, a $5 bill or whatever the counterfeit, you know, whatever the narrative is. We don't want to live in a society where that is not only not condemned, but you know, sometimes encouraged. And so, you know, I'm just really grateful that, you know, over this past year, we bonded on that notion of doing something in our community about this.
Yeah, I think, you know, it was the timing of everything. I think, I mean, as terrible as it was to be locked down like we were and not be able to move freely, it also forced us to see some things that'll move your soul. And I think, you know, I'm hopeful that because of that, more people will be engaged. I think, you know, I just think we were all in that like, put your head down and just grind mode. And I think we were like, all of us were in that mode. And then when we had that stripped from us, you know, when we had to sit down and you know,
take a look in the mirror,
be with ourselves and take a look in the mirror, I think a lot of us didn't like what we were seeing. And so I think that's, you know, I'm hopeful that momentum continues. And real change actually happens.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think, you know, that's where we got the idea of All-Star Advocacy, really, you know, combining those two worlds that, you know, since, Muhammad Ali, John Carlo, Tommy Smith, all the way up until present day, Kaepernick. We see what we value in our society. We love our sports. We honor and we revere, pro athletes because of their talent and prowess. And, it's something that does bring us all together at some point.
That's the next step, right? And that's why, you gotta find things in your community to start, because yes, we all look at the national level and things, obviously that's important, but that's not where you live. You know what I'm saying? It's not the people who live in your community. And it's important I think we've realized how important it is to focus in on that and kind of bridge outward, as opposed to starting out and trying to work yourself back towards the area you live. I think that's the wrong way to go about it.
I agree. Think global, act local.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean, now I guess where we can kind of pivot this conversation is, this podcast that we do and the work that we do obviously is geared towards our youth age. What would you tell, given your experience, given your lived experience, right? And knowing, in 2021, the part they play in society, what would you tell, our youth, female, playing soccer, or, a boy playing football, growing up in this new era of athlete activism, knowing, the reach that you may have, what would you tell them now?
I would tell them, know your worth, know what you're bringing to the table. I would also tell them, just keep being them. I have to be honest, I'm inspired by a lot of the young folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pushing 40. I'm not old, but I'm not young either.
40's the new 30. 40's the new 30.
And I gotta say, I'm inspired by the way and the precision that they move. There's a almost a confidence, almost a just like removed from fear that I think some of us suffered with early on in life. At that age, I think that's awesome. But I would tell them to pay attention, to not just, because as an athlete, sometimes you have to be so singularly focused in order to get to your goal.
Tunnel vision.
You have to have it. It's okay to sometimes, remove it for a little bit so you can see what's going on around you. Especially as an athlete, because when you're an athlete and you're pushing to get to the collegiate level, to get to the pro level, it takes a certain selfishness in order to get there. That is just a reality of it. And I think it was thought for a long time that selfishness could only maintain a few things at a time. But I think what we're seeing now is that you can have those goals and lock in and be singularly focused, but also be able to pay attention to some of the things that are going around you and the people that they affect.
Right. This next generation, I mean, these kids, they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They are that notion of that, the fear that's not part of their DNA. It's they don't even understand it. They don't even understand it either. And I think that's dope. Right. So, I mean, that's what inspires us to keep doing this work, is seeing that's the canvas we have, right? And then we can just add to that, in terms of, like you said, knowing, having a good, a base of history and really standing for things that you feel you have convictions to.
That's the thing that I think that has allowed us to progress, is that there's been a certain amount of understanding of history. I think that's really important. You got to know where you're coming from in order to know where you need to go. And that's the thing that I think the next generation I think they got that part down very well.
Yeah, man. Can't argue with that. And so, before we get you out of here, I know time is of the essence, and you got a million things you got going on right now. But before we sign off, if you can, I mean, we've had a great conversation already in terms of what your ethos and your priority is to be a part of, a member of this community and constantly give back. But can you let the listeners know exactly, what you have going on outside of, calling games and being affiliated with the Padres? What else do you have going on? What else do you do?
So my family has the Tony Gwynn Legacy Foundation. We try to help kids, achieve through sport, mainly baseball. I have some travel ball baseball teams myself. Because of my schedule, I don't get a chance to coach them up, but I get a chance to see them every once in a while. And, it's something that I enjoy doing for the community here. I'm also on the board of the American Lung Association. And currently we're putting together a program almost like Zoom classes for the underserved community, the Black and brown communities here in San Diego, so that they have an understanding of not only COVID and exactly the misinformation, what's not true, what is true, but they can get to understand lung health as well, and how, because I know there's a lot of people like myself grew up with asthma and think that, because you have it, you can't play any sports, you can't do anything. We want to educate, families that don't have access to that kind of information. Just among some other things that we got going on. But that's what I have going on. I also work with one of my favorite things to do is I get to work with Paving Great Futures as well. I started working with them, now maybe 3 years ago. It's interesting. We actually, Armad, who's my guy, we actually met through one of our high school friends back when we were in high school, and we ended up coming together. He ended up passing away, and we ended up coming together. And I saw the work that he was doing, and it just blew my mind. Yeah, I mean, from the CHAMP program to the financial literacy program that they do. I mean, there is just so much like actual work that they do. I wanted to be a part of it, and so I've been a part of their group, or at least helping their group for a while. And then, as you mentioned, I hopped on with you guys here at All-Star Advocacy because that's an element that I don't know that I really understood until I was older, So imagine if I could have participated in the process when I was, 18 and 21, moving on, and really be engaged. It was just something that I didn't do until later on in life. So I love the work you guys do as well.
Well, man, we can't thank you enough for joining on and being a part of us, but just speaking to everything you have going on, right? Like watch it, because I follow your social media, we go back and forth, and, seeing that you're involved with the Lung Association as somebody who also grew up with, asthma, knowing it's not a terminal, you can,
right.
There are resources through sport, through information, right? It's getting the right information, through these resources, and speaking on your relationship with Armand and their LACE program. They have kind of a similar civic engagement program.
Right.
These are all ways that, like-minded people from this, America's finest city can really delve into and really tackle important issues for
right.
them.
Think how many kids that are impacted. Like I didn't know anything about financial literacy. I knew nothing, and so imagine getting a whole bunch of money and not really knowing what the rules are, what you can, what you shouldn't do, what's a good investment. You didn't know any of that. And so these kids are getting a chance to learn that at an early age, to where they can have a foundation underneath them,
Yeah.
the work that I don't get me started on paving grid PFG, man. They do a terrific job.
Yeah, man. Couldn't agree more. Well, look, before we sign off, I know we've almost run the time, but just to end on a note, got a couple questions for you outside of outside of the conversation, but definitely still sticking with sports sports and I guess modern culture that I'd love to ask you. Obviously, you are through your social media. I've come to find out you are a hardcore Laker fan, and just Kobe's influence on you, and the Mamba mentality, and just so much of his legacy. I'm a Clipper fan.
I won't hold that against you, Mike.
through undergrad, I really got with Lob City and Blake and DJ and CP3.
Right.
Really, the Donald Sterling issue that came about 2014, 2015, and the NBA's handling of that is why, not just the history of the San Diego Clippers, but just wanted your thoughts on a little big brother, little brother rivalry. What do you think? What do you think is going to shape down the line for? You think you guys are going to repeat, or maybe little brother's this will be the year?
I don't think the Clippers will ever have that year, if I'm being honest.
No love.
It's interesting because you brought up Donald Sterling, and I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Ramona Shelburne's the files. It's like a podcast on the whole story of Donald Sterling in the background. It was so well done. From everything of when they decided, Matt Barnes and CP, they decided they were going to flip their jerseys around. I mean, the whole backstory. I suggest you listen to it. It was really good.
Okay.
The Lakers got this. I think I think they're going to make a move before the deadline. I'm concerned about Mark at the center position.
Looking his age, maybe.
Looking his age a little bit, but they're deep enough for a regular season to be fine doing that. I'm concerned that, last year, although JaVale and Dwight didn't shoot the ball, they pretty much ate up every ball that was on the glass.
Now you guys have Harrell.
They block, and so we've lost a little bit on the defensive side there, but I still like. You give me LBJ, man. You give me that dude and 4 really good players around him, 4 good players around him. He gonna make it happen. I mean, I can't. He is so impressive because what he's doing at his age, and I don't see any slowdown.
Nope.
I don't see any, and I'm the biggest Kobe guy on the planet. Right. I saw Kobe start his body start to wear down over time. I mean, he was still amazing during that time, but
it's got to break down. No, I mean, maybe with the exception of Brady and LeBron.
If eventually you break down, right? And LeBron is different. LeBron is just he's 6'9". I don't know another human being that is built the way he's built, and so he can do a little bit different things. But in terms of Kobe. It's first of all, it's still hard to believe that he's no longer with us. It's crazy to think about. That was my guy. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was 16, one of the clubhouse attendants for the Padres, his name is Tony Patrica. He got to be the head clubhouse guy when the Lakers came to San Diego to play exhibition games. So. He asked me if I wanted to be the towel boy, and I jumped at the opportunity to be around Shaq and Kobe. And so I get a chance to go. I get there early because I wanted to shoot at the sports arena, so I got some shots up.
Wow!
And as I'm coming out, Shaq's coming in. He puts his hand on my head, and just think. So he put his hand on, and his thumb came all the way down to my nose, right? But long story short, after the game, I got a chance to talk to Kobe for I don't know. In my mind, it felt like an hour, but it was probably just like 5 minutes, right? And he was just the coolest cat ever. And I was already a fan from that point on. Like that was my guy. And then to watch, just to watch him evolve as a human being, I think is the most impressive part about Kobe. And it also showed you that you had to have. It gave you that idea that, and at least in Kobe's mind, he had to be the singular focused monster that he was. But then you saw at the end of his career where he no longer felt like he needed to be there, or he had just gave everything he got to a point where he was content. You saw him evolve into a different person, You think you had the Mamba, and then you had Kobe. And when basketball ended, even maybe his last year, he kind of just you saw the evolution of him. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I appreciated about him most, that was who he was for a long time. And then he realized he didn't need to be like that off the court. And he probably never was like that off the court, Right. And it just was. It's inspiring to see how many people he touched. Whether they knew him or they didn't know him. I compare it to when my father passed, hearing stories from people that had never met him, just watched him play. Yeah. And hearing how much that meant to them. I understood it when Kobe passed. Right. It was like I had that one encounter with him, but it was probably no different than a million other encounters he had with somebody. But it didn't change. It just made me look at him in a completely different light.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. And I mean, it speaks. It's a great parallel to your father's legacy. Obviously, like my family, my parents, they never met physically, your father, but growing up, going to games at the Q and just our childhood and what it meant to be not only somebody from this, from the area who's poured your whole career into it, but, was an even better person off the field and, can lead. You can't take anything away from his, his batting titles and everything, but the fact that he's a person that you can look up to, irrelevant of his statistics, right? You can change a city, you can change a region, you can change the world, really. And it's great. It's a great parallel, really, with this past year, and seeing what LeBron did in honor in bubble and going forward. There's a whole nother level of respect that even a Clipper fan has to say, what, that's class.
Yeah, and we got to see in terms of LeBron, we got to see like later on, there's footage that I had never seen with him and Kobe before. You got to see that, as much as they might have been adversaries on the court, as soon as that whistle ended, there was a certain respect level between the two of them that always was there, even when they were playing against each other. So it's cool to see him kind of taking that torch now and carrying it for the purple and gold.
Yeah. Well, speaking of torch, and we can't do a sit down without talking about yours truly. I got to get your take. Obviously, you're going to be heading out to spring training here soon this next week, and we've growing up a Padre fan, knowing everything. The whole history, right, of really going up against our neighbors to the north, and you have a very interesting tie to both the LA community, playing there, but also being a hometown San Diegan. I gotta ask, is this the year that little brother really makes a run with all the acquisitions we've gotten in this offseason? They've reloaded a bit, but do you see this as a potential?
It should be. It should be. It should be the year that there's a. I mean, to be honest, I think there was a real push last year. I mean, if Cody Bellinger doesn't go over that wall and snatch that homer, we're looking at a completely different series.
Heartbreaker.
But he did, and so you tip your hat because they earned that title. But this certainly is a year where the Padres should be able to, assuming that they can stay healthy all year long. This is a team that's built to definitely challenge the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers, most people will tell you that the Dodgers probably still have the leg up. I'm not 100% sure on that. I like the Padres move. I really do. I think that they clearly the Dodgers have been paying attention because they went out and they added Bauer to their pack, who was coming off a Cy Young award. So you certainly have to respect that. And you got Buehler, you got Kershaw, but I like what the Padres have. I really do. When you watch those teams match up last year, it was even. And so I'm looking forward to what could go down as if everything plays out the way we expect it to, this could go down as one of the best division races of all time. I mean, that's how good both of these teams look on paper. Now, ultimately, you got to go out and you got to play the games and see, what happens. But I think we all are anticipating, much like people in LA anticipate Lakers Clippers. Most of us who pay attention to baseball are anticipating a Dodgers Lakers battle for the division.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me, a Dodgers Padres battle for the division.
Lakers on your mind.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great year. I've got the date circled. The schedule just came out, and we're going to be watching. I'll be checking in on every game, man. You cannot, wait to get you on the call, and just to continually, keep in touch. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and really, speak your truth and speak your story to the next generation. Because at the end of the day, it's our love for sports. That's really gonna, really, really bond us together. And it's what we do with our platforms, right? At the end of the day, it's how we choose to whether it's legacy or just impact, it's all about, spreading it around. And just thank you for the person you are. And we're going to keep rocking. We're going to stay in communication. And just thank you, man. Thank you for joining us on this episode.
It was my pleasure, Mike. Continued luck and success, and continue to push. I think, reach one, teach one. I think that's what we're all on right now. But again, thank you for having me on.
That's it, man. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening in to the All-Star Advocacy Podcast. Michael Castro. Thanks, Tony.
No problem.